Again, my name's Lisa. I'm an addict.
Lisa.
This workshop is on the concepts, and to start off, Jack is going to read the 12 concepts for us.
I'm Jack, and I'm an addict.
Hey, Jack.
1, to fulfill our fellowship's primary purpose, the NA groups have joined together to create a structure which develops, coordinates, and maintains service on behalf of NA as a whole. 2, the final responsibility and authority for NA's service rests with the NA groups. 3, the NA groups delegate to the service structure the authority necessary to fulfill the responsibilities assigned to it. 4, effective leadership is highly valued in Narcotics Anonymous. Leadership qualities should be carefully considered when selecting trusted servants. 5, for each responsibility assigned to the service structure, a single point of decision and accountability should be clearly defined. 6, group conscience is a spiritual means by which we invite a loving God to influence our decisions. 7, all members of a service body bear substantial responsibility for the body's decisions and should be allowed to fully participate in this decision-making process. 8, our service structure depends on the integrity and effectiveness of our communications. 9, all elements of our service structure have the responsibility to carefully consider all viewpoints in their decision-making process. 10, any member of a service body can petition that body for the redress of a personal grievance without fear of reprisal. 11, NA funds are to be used to further our primary purpose and must be managed responsibly. 12, in keeping with the spiritual nature of Narcotics Anonymous, our service should always be our structure should always be one of service, never of government.
Thanks, Jack.
Thanks, Jack. We have 2 speakers that will be talking to us about the concepts today. Our first speaker is Bart.
Thanks. I'm Bart. I'm an addict.
Hey, Bart.
My clean date is September 9th, 1988. Got clean in Sussex County, New Jersey. I was 16 years old, and I had basically come to a place in my life where I could no longer point the finger at anyone else or blame anyone else for the circumstances in my life. I ended up taking complete and full responsibility for my behavior. I accepted all the consequences of my behavior, and I had tried on several occasions to make promises to myself to not repeat those things, and failed miserably. So upon coming into the fellowship, one of the things that I realized is that my lack of ability to control my using was just as difficult as my lack of ability to make a promise to myself and follow through with whatever idea or whatever promise it is that I made to myself. And so, in the process of getting clean, they started to talk to me about spiritual principles, and things in my life started to change. I started to get a better understanding of how to work with others, and how to learn about myself, that maybe I didn't need to take everything so personally. Maybe I didn't need to be so to look at others in an untrustworthy manner. There were a lot of personal elements that added to my abilities through step work, through working with traditions, and working on service committees with local levels. Whether it was a home group level or whether it was a area level. And then, there was a lot of incorporation at that time of new information, new policies. There were a lot of things that I didn't quite understand, but I knew that there were service members who were talking about things on another level. They were talking about things on a level that didn't seem to apply so much to the groups. And I started to wonder where all of that was happening, kind of where all of the information that I was hearing being brought back to meetings by GSRs, for instance. I was wondering where those GSRs were going to get that stuff that they were bringing back. And so I got involved with some of the more area regional service levels. I started to learn a little bit about the world service level, a little bit about how to get information, from a conference agenda, for instance. I mean, I don't know if anyone here is familiar with conference agenda coming up. This is our new cycle. I was involved with the previous conference agenda that dealt with advancing in some of the messages in our literature and developing new literature. I'm actually still in the process of reading some of the new literature, and I'm pretty amazed with all of the information that we had brought back to meetings and meetings had discussed and voted on, and somehow this was one of the first times since I had gotten clean that I was able to see how the whole process of the upside, well, I guess they call it the upside down pyramid for lack of a better term, to where the groups are really responsible for all the information that is handed down to us from World Services, because there were several times when I had issues that I wanted addressed, and I would call World Services and I would say, well, what are we supposed to do about this? We got people in our meetings doing this, and we got people making this message or people doing that, and they'd be like, well, why don't you take it to your local meeting? And, and if you need to, you can make a motion, and that motion can be brought back to us, and then we'll send it back to you, and you can vote on it there. And it was kind of this whole process that, I had to get used to, not being able to rely on what I considered the higher levels of service to give us our initiatives, and that, they were there to support us. Throughout that process, there was a couple of things that had come up, and one of the things that came up was in my local area at the time, and I'm gonna mention a few things, but I want to be very conscientious about it because our traditions are pretty clear about placing principles before personalities. Now, it's one of the things that I've supported in our local areas for the last 20 years. And I don't know about any of you, but in my area there were some strong personalities, and they liked to run things. I didn't like them running things, probably because I had that strong personality too, and there were a few clashes. There were a few clashes where one of us had to relent and leave the room, and eventually we would get back together over coffee and say, hey, that whole thing was pretty ridiculous. I'm not sure where all that ended up going to, but let's try and get this under control. And I can mention Ronnie. God rest his soul. Ronnie died in a car accident, but he was one of the individuals that I would routinely clash with on an area level, and he taught me so much. I mean, he taught me about all this stuff. I mean, it was the people who were in the rooms that were challenging me that sent me home crying about how do I do service? I mean, how do I maintain this tradition, and how do I maintain my principles, and how do I look out for the welfare of Narcotics Anonymous as a whole? I mean, I felt, they've been telling me this whole time, that's my responsibility. It's like, that's what I'm supposed to be contributing in service. And I had a great service sponsor, Ron M. I love him to death because every single time I saw Ron M. carry this message of service, I thought to myself, how can I be like that? How can I be perceived in such a way that's not so omnipotent? And Ron was very, very humble man, and so he kind of became my mentor, and I started to make the effort to relieve myself of some of that ego and to start behaving in what I would consider more like Ron, in more of a humble fashion. And one of the opportunities that I had to first start doing that was, during the last conference agenda, we started doing these workshops. And during those workshops, it was very clear that I was supposed to be bringing information back to our fellowship, kind of as a recorder. Not necessarily based in my opinion, but as a recorder, as I heard it in the levels of service that we don't normally hear on local levels. I was supposed to be able to relay anything that I had learned, anything that I had collected, anything that would help somebody to make an informed opinion about our motions. And it's very challenging. It was very challenging to me, but it was also very inspiring, because after working on that area level for a long time, we had kind of gotten into this stalemate with, I don't know if any of you remember what the whole Robert's Rules approach was, but at the time of that last report, we were starting to question how to get around this whole kind of control issue with Robert's Rules, because there were some people who had learned the methods that were used at the time to kind of eliminate certain people from being able to participate with the whole Robert's Rules assassination thing. And and I may have been guilty of that myself as well. I mean, that was all just a part of how we tried to get business done, because sometimes we just want to break for lunch, honestly. And and sometimes our kids were still at school and we needed to go pick them up, and I don't have time to sit around and be doing all this stuff. But I started to address issues with my own time management, and I started addressing issues with the area to say, we should be applying more of our effort and more of our support and encouragement to these principles, so that we don't make decisions based on what's convenient, because what they were introducing at the time, and I think that it's been adopted to this point, is what's called consensus-based decision making, and it's a challenge. And I will say that I've loved the challenge since it started. I'm going to read it real quick, just because it has a pretty good description of it. This is out of It Works How and Why. This is on 136. It says, as members listen carefully to each other and consult their personal understanding of loving God, something happens. Solutions to problems become apparent, solutions that take into consideration the needs of everyone concerned. In developing a group conscience, a clear mutual understanding or consensus arises. Based upon the understanding gained by sharing group conscience, a group may move on to a vote or in order to make decisions. In the best circumstances, however, the group continues discussion until it reaches unanimity. The resulting solution may be so obvious that no vote is needed. And that was kind of the description of consensus-based decision making that I found in the text before it actually had its title. And I mean, really, that's kind of what carried the underlying idea of what we were trying to accomplish. Yet it seemed to eliminate a lot of the form that we had adopted, a lot of the rules that we had adopted to try and force these things to happen. There were a lot of times when we left the room and said, well, we didn't reach a lot of unanimous decisions at first. Eventually it got a little bit easier. So what I'm going to share a little bit about right now, and I need to kind of go back. I need to go back for a second, because I made a mistake, and this is how I learned. And this is how I learned to try and be a little less rigid when it comes to my introduction of information. The one thing that I forgot is how to use the concepts in a concept meeting. And what I would like to say is, under concept 6, group conscience is the spiritual means by which we invite a loving God to influence our decisions. Now, I started going into my local areas and I started reading a concept during the open forum of every local area. One of the local areas that I went to and started reading a 6th concept about was how to open a meeting and how to address an actual service meeting with the service prayer. And I didn't see that happening a whole lot. It was it was just something that seemed to, we were used to doing a lot of things like serenity prayer and taking our moment of silence and being able to do our 3rd step prayer. But when it came to the service work that the concepts we're talking about, that actual service prayer, and I don't know if you can help me out with this, or you're familiar with it. You are familiar with it?
Yeah, but I can't remember right now.
And that's kind of one of those things where, I'd hope to be able to take a few minutes and kind of get together my thoughts and kind of go back into this history that I'm talking about. But unfortunately, when I walked out of my house this morning, my car didn't start. So the fact that I'm here at all today was by the grace of God and a jump start that allowed me to get here 15 minutes before we started. So I'm kind of going off of, what my previous experience has been. And I guess I just want to invite God into this meeting. I want to be able to say that everything I do, everything I share should be in the spirit of how our Creator intends it, and reflect on how our higher power wants the direction of Narcotics Anonymous as a whole to be handled in care by its members. So the first place I started with the idea of coming into a concepts workshop is how many people don't know anything about concepts? And there's 4 or 5 hands up in the room. I went into the history display that they have here, and typically when I start looking for solutions or answers to questions about Narcotics Anonymous, I go to the predecessors. The predecessors were the ones who presented us with all of this wonderful information to carry on and stay clean and to organize events like this that, I don't know about you, but I would have never imagined a group of 10, 15, 20, maybe 30 addicts to get together in a room and to put on an event like this without having there be a significant amount of turmoil. All right, so they would just go crazy. But the bottom line is that I've been seeing these things happen since the day I got clean, and I didn't get clean in an area where there wasn't any recovery. I can't say that I started an area. I can't say that I started a group in one area that became something else. I mean, when I got to Narcotics Anonymous in 1988, I was given a full list of meetings and phone numbers that was extensive. I had a pretty much unlimited participation of people to serve with. I had a significant amount of experience, strength, and hope to use as a pool, and that's kind of where I try and remember that. This stuff was not something that I needed to improve on. It wasn't something that I needed to create. It's something that I just needed to go back, maybe needed to refresh my abilities in. And so I went into the historical, the memorabilia, NA memorabilia. I found the original conference agenda report for our concepts. And in the conference agenda report, there was a few there was a few issues that I just hadn't really considered before, because whatever I've done work on the concepts, I've always grabbed this book. But I never really thought where the book came from. I mean, these kind of things are just given to me. And so I went back into the approval form. The approval form of this book was actually started in 1984. There was a committee called the Select Committee, and the Select Committee was given the task of producing a list of principles for service, because there were certain traditions that were already established. There were certain guidelines that had already been established, and committees were already operating pretty effectively at that time. And what they wanted to do is they wanted to help them be more effective. So they produced this kind of rough draft of what the concepts are. And of course, like the description I gave you earlier, it was presented to the fellowship through the conference agenda report. And everybody kind of looked over it and sent all of their feedback in, and it was produced. Now, it was actually approved in the 1992 conference agenda. I think that it's actually listed in here somewhere as being a piece of literature from 1992. But the quote from the Select Committee was this: "There's a need for universally recognized principles to form a service committee and service boards." And the question that they asked was, how can a service structure be adequately described without such principles? They came up with a list of guidelines that they wanted to incorporate as a part of our concepts. And the guidelines go like this. Number one is to help free up group responsibilities and support their autonomy. Two was to help carefully delegate responsibility to the service structure. Three, help us select effective Narcotics Anonymous leaders. Four, help recall us to our spiritual foundations. And five, help promote a better, broader communication throughout the entire fellowship. Now, I've taken slight liberties in that description with just not having written it out verbatim from the text. I didn't need to, because all of those goals have been accomplished in our concepts. But the important part that I wanted to mention about that was that this was all a supplement to what was existing already, and the goal was to help. In every one of these concepts, the goal was to help, to be more effective, to introduce a deeper meaning, a deeper understanding, to promote more discussion. And I've always felt like that spirit of Narcotics Anonymous has been what kept us alive, is just to continue that ability to not just let good enough be good enough. I mean, we could have functioned with Robert's rules indefinitely. I think AA did it for a lot longer than we did. But we wanted to promote something a little bit more cooperative, a little bit something more teamwork oriented, something less exclusive. So for any of you who may be going back to an area that has these elements, it's important to start encouraging this stuff as the concepts request to help select effective NA leaders. And if our GSRs, if our chair people, if our vice chairs, if our service structure is made up of people who are not being effective leaders, there's enough information in here about what an effective leader is. And if we're not holding them accountable for being what our literature asks them to be, please address it. One of the things that I've noticed is that we get a little bit nervous about addressing things like, let's not be disruptive. I mean, we can do that as effective Narcotics Anonymous leaders because we're trying to promote and maintain the atmosphere of recovery, which is perfectly clear to 90% of the people. But it's those 10% who seem to think that, well, I can do anything I want. That's fine. I get that you want to do anything you want, but you don't have to do it in the room where we're trying to maintain an atmosphere of recovery. You can meet with the other 9% of the people who aren't, outside. That's been addressed in a few areas inappropriately, and I will say right now in my area, I have some opinions about groups that are not addressing that appropriately. And even though they are addressing the concerns and they are addressing the disruptions, they're doing it in such a way that's very egotistical and it's very rude and very disrespectful. And so I want to try and encourage that, Tradition 6, these are all comparable with our traditions. It tempers our zeal to carry the message, establishing boundaries for our relationships or relations with others in our area. I promote unity. I make the effort to promote as much unity as I possibly can. There are a lot of issues that involve controversy. There's a lot of issues that involve prejudice or disrespect. There's a lot of ways that people will address things inappropriately. And they don't have to exist. It doesn't have to be that way. Our literature is so kind of encompassing when it comes to how we carry the message, that it can be done with kindness. It can be done with. Yeah. I'm overly emotional about all this stuff. Sorry. I really feel, I feel in my heart that one of the things that makes us so amazing is that selfish, self-centered attitude of the addict to turn into such a loving and caring force of change. There's a lot of inspiration there. It's similar to how I was inspired last night by Jerry, who came into our opening meeting and shared after, somewhere near 40, upwards of 40 years of clean time to, come in and share with us his experience, strength, and hope as a predecessor. I'm moved by that because a lot of times when I was, at 16 years old thinking, what am I going to do? I'm going to be here a while. And I just celebrated that 10,000 day mark and here I am looking at, well, what if I could make 20,000 days? What am I going to do then? And it's guys like, my service sponsor, Ron, who inspires me and who encourages me. And I'm losing track of time. Sorry, I've had to fill, where are we at? And this ends?
3:30? 3.
All right, so.
We're getting close.
We're pretty close. All right, good. It went for me from wanting to share for like 10 minutes to having to share for like 30 minutes and then having to learn how to share for like an hour. And now I get cut off after 3 minutes in every meeting. I'm like, what's up with that buzzer? That was for the people who didn't have anything to share, who wanted to share using. Buzz those people. Anyway, God bless y'all for putting up with me. So let's just, real quick, I want to make a comment on unity in accordance with the page 133 here in the text. And it says here that no problem or disagreement is more significant than our need for each other's support. The fundamental importance of our common welfare strengthens our understanding of all the other traditions. Many questions can simply be answered by determining how the action we contemplate will affect the unity of the fellowship. Will it serve to divide us, or will it bring us closer together? And that's kind of one of those. And that's kind of one of those elements that I try and introduce when I'm talking about the concepts. And I'm gonna have our. I'm sorry,
Karen.
I'm gonna have. I don't know anybody here yet. It's kind of, I'm outside of my area and I'm getting established in a new area. I rarely remember people's faces and names, so I constantly have to do this, but eventually we'll get there. And she'll be able to be a little bit more specific about going through the concepts for anybody. And, I'm welcome to talk about this stuff ad nauseum with anybody who has an interest. It really has been one of the things that helped me maintain my recovery and to stay inspired, to stay fresh, to stay new. I hope that I'm not one of those grouchy guys that, somebody approaches in 10 years and I've got, my opinion about everything that I see going on. I think that my opinions have changed about a lot of things, especially since I started participating at a level of service where, I have to be considerate that the common welfare as a whole can be affected by how I give my opinion of the way things are organized, or how similar to the convention here. I've always been to conventions that were places of happiness and joy and inspiration, and they've been emotional. There's been a lot of hugging. There's been a lot of crying. There's been points at which people were making major celebrations or major changes in their lives that they were either supporting or looking for support from. And when it comes to how we display ourselves as recovering members of Narcotics Anonymous, I don't think I've ever come to a convention where I didn't feel a genuine humility in the joy and the peace and all of the love that I saw poured into being able to serve. And I would only hope that we can serve with that level of kind of a peace about it, and maybe avoid the conflict and the controversy and all of the politics that come from the outside issues. They don't need to contribute to our recovery process in some of our service events. So, as individual members, all we can do is support that, and so it's all I ask. And I'm going to turn it over to Karen and be quiet. Thank you.
Thanks,
Bart.
Hey family, I'm Karen. I'm an addict.
Hey, Karen.
And I really want to say out loud that I'm very grateful to have this opportunity to share on the concepts. It's usually one of the smallest meetings in a workshop. And it was funny because somebody suggested that they wanted to go out and cross off concepts on the little sign out there and put relationships, and that would bring a whole bunch of people in here and then go, oh look, we gotcha. And the whole point is that, and you said it out loud, the same thing I was thinking, is that the concepts are all about relationships and how we have a relationship with each other, whether it's in service or with the outside world or with each other in day-to-day living. And I remember when I got clean August 1995, so I have about 20 years and 6 months now. And I remember I was very fortunate to get clean in an area with a lot of people who had a lot of clean time, a lot of recovery, and did a lot of service. And when I would ask, well, how do you do that committee? How do you do that literature? And they would say, come here, we'll show you. You know, how do you put on an event? Come here, we'll show you. And they taught me well. They taught me really, really well. And I remember at that time, in the area where I got clean, there was a lot of controversy about the concepts, whether or not to adopt them. And there were areas and regions who were like, we're not adopting those. And there were others who were like, well, everybody needs to. And you know how we are. And being new, all that drama and controversy sort of intrigued me. And so I wanted to know what it was all about. And so I went to people who knew and who could point me to where it was written in our literature. And I used to think that our literature was written by gods, and it kind of is. You know, it's a collective conscience of the Narcotics Anonymous Fellowship, so it kind of is a higher power, if not a god. And I love that we write our literature. It's really important to me that we write our literature, and that's what speaks to me in my heart. And the thing about the concepts that, you know, like you said, Bart, they go hand in hand with the steps and the traditions, and, you know, and I'm not one of these kind of people that can say, okay, if you look at tradition 2 and concept 2, and I can't do that. That's not how I work. It's more what speaks to me in my heart. But I did underline a few things that I thought were really important about the concepts, and I want to share a little bit of my experience with a couple of these things. But it talks about, ideally, responsibility and authority are flip sides of the same coin. The exercise of one is also the exercise of the other. We delegate authority as groups to our trusted servants to go and do things, to operate the phone line, to carry meetings to H&I. I have been in areas where the area policy or guidelines were so tight that you couldn't change a period on a sentence in the policy unless it went back to all the groups. That's not really delegating authority to our trusted servants. They can take care of those sort of housekeeping things. It's okay, as long as they use effective communication to tell us this is what we're doing and this is how we're doing it. My group really doesn't care exactly how you conduct area meetings or how you conduct a regional meeting. They don't really care about those little nuts and bolts. I care about the nuts, but my group doesn't really care about the nuts and bolts. So if we choose effective leaders that it talks about, that we can entrust to carry out these tasks, I don't need to know about the nuts and bolts of how they do it. I need to know about the results of what they're doing. And that's that effective communication. Come and tell me what you're doing that is fulfilling that purpose that we've assigned to you. And let me know if you're having a problem so that maybe we can step in and help before it becomes a disaster, hopefully. You know, I used to call my sponsor and tell her what a good job I did in a certain situation without her help. I wanted that atta girl. And she would tell me, I can't help you if you call me after the fact. You know? And I might have done a good job at it, and I might not have, but I probably would have been a better job at something if I'd have consulted her first. It took me a minute to learn that one. And it talks about our trusted servants will serve us best when we grant them the freedom to exercise their best judgment. They're trusted servants. If I trust you, I do that because I've examined and made judgments on your behavior as I've seen it. And I don't need to micromanage you. You know, our groups don't need to micromanage our areas. We need to pay attention. We are the authority. We have the authority, but we also delegate the responsibility. We talk about when selecting trusted servants, after all, it's the whole person we trust, not just their skills. one of the first things we look at when selecting trusted service is humility. It is a very humbling experience to serve in Narcotics Anonymous for me. My first coffee maker job was a very humbling experience for me. I had about 90 days clean, and they gave me a key to a facility, and I was like, they're going to trust me to show up next week. That's like a whole week away. Holy shit, this is a just for today program. But I showed up the next week, early, made coffee. It's probably horrible, but I made it. Capable NA leadership exhibits the full range of personal characteristics associated with a spiritual awakening. Our leaders must have the integrity needed to hear others well, yet still be able to stand on sound principle, to compromise and disagree without being disagreeable. I don't think that went very well. And to demonstrate the courage of their convictions, while at the same time being able to surrender. And the whole paradox thing. And you may have heard this before. 3 of the things that are essential to leadership are honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. Where have I heard that before? And one of the most important things about the 4th concept where it talks about leadership is that any NA member can be a leader. And every NA member has the right to serve the fellowship. It doesn't matter what your job is, if you're a professional bookkeeper or professional whatever, that's great. That's awesome. We can use those skills. But just because I might be a professional bookkeeper doesn't mean that I want to be the bookkeeper for an area or a region. You know, maybe I want to learn some other skills. You would be amazed at some of the skills I have on my professional resume that I learned in Narcotics Anonymous by doing service. When we carefully consider the leadership qualities of those we ask to serve, we can confidently give them the room they need to exercise those qualities on our behalf. Very important. The 5th concept talks about defining the task that needs to be done, and then consider the kind of authority we must delegate in order to get it done. We don't want to have 2 committees trying to do the same job, duplicating efforts, or squabbling over the authority. That's important. I think a lot of areas, I've seen a lot of situations where, because it says in the area or region policy that we have 6 committees, you know, one for this, one for this, one for this, that they must all be filled. And so we sort of stick warm bodies in those positions, and they're not always very effective. We don't really tell them what we want them to do. We just think, okay, you figure it out. That is not being effective from a group perspective or from an individual perspective. We lose addicts when that happens. It's very important. We need to think about things like clean time. You know, there are a lot of situations where there's a clean time requirement. I've seen situations where clean time was waived and given to somebody who was not ready to accept that kind of responsibility, and we've lost the addict. Now, there are times where it's perfectly acceptable. You know, there are situations, but not every situation, and there are good reasons for that. You already talked about the group conscience is the means by which we collectively invite our loving higher power, so I'm not going to go over that again. You covered it very well. Thank you. One of the most important things that I feel about the concepts is in the 7th concept, where it talks about each service body should encourage all its members to participate in the decision-making process. And I'm really grateful that so many areas and regions have moved to, and even home groups now have moved to the consensus-based decision-making process, because now everybody really does have a voice. And there are many times where that lone voice, the one that's afraid to speak up, is the one that has the most to say that can bring to light things that everybody else that was like, oh, I know what I feel about this, I know how I feel about this, and I know how I feel, and let's fight it out. And then there's that one lone quiet voice that says, but maybe, and they offer a perspective that nobody else offered, and it changes the entire perception for the group. That is huge. When I first got clean, there were people, I talked about those people that had all that clean time and did all that service, and I would show up at like regional board meetings, and I would just want to sit in the back of the room and listen, because I wanted to know about those nuts and bolts. The nuts and bolts were really important. How do a bunch of dope fiends accomplish anything, ever, and do it so well? And so I would show up at these places, and there was always an opportunity, even back when we were using Robert's Rules and all that kind of stuff, there was always an opportunity at every service committee meeting I ever went to where somebody who was not a member of that service committee but was a member of Narcotics Anonymous had an opportunity to ask questions or to share, and a lot of times that ended up getting me on the committee. A lot of times I showed up at one committee and I asked a few questions in open forum or whatever, and after the meeting they said, "Can you write?" And I was like, "Well, yeah." "Good, we need a secretary." "Oh, okay." And I'm very grateful for that. It is the full participation of each member of the team that is of great value, so that we express the collective conscious as a whole. I mentioned earlier about communication. When we delegate authority to someone to do a task, then we need to hear about that task. And you talked about it too. Clearly communicating, relaying the information. If I'm the GSR, I can come back with all kinds of opinions, but that's not really my job. My job is to report to you what was presented at area. I can give you my opinion, and I'm happy to give you my opinion outside of the business meeting or in the proper time at business meeting, but as a GSR or as a whatever, my job is to effectively communicate. One of the things that I learned really well as secretary of that particular committee was, if I wrote in the minutes, Bart said, and a year or 2 years later we were looking back at that situation, somebody would go, "Who's Bart? What was Bart's role in this?" Nobody really knew. It wasn't important that Bart said it. It was more important that the vice chair said, or, this GSR presented. And I learned how to do that. And that served me really well in my professional life, too, in taking minutes of, notes of meetings. It really didn't matter who said it. In fact, it was probably more important that you didn't know who said it, but more important what they said. And that's really, that's amazing, Another thing that I really wanted to bring up was part about any member of a service body can petition that body for the redress of a personal grievance without fear of reprisal. I have seen this in action more than once. Back when I was the one who had like 2 or 3 years clean, and the people that pulled me into their wonderful circle of service and love had 15 and 20 years clean, we had a situation where 2 members had some really strong personal disagreements, and it erupted into some pretty loud confrontations. And one of the situations was at a dance, and I was close to one of the people, and I knew the other person, and they were outside the stands, and one person was very vocally, animatedly poking finger in the other one's chest, and I didn't hear the words that they were saying. I didn't have to hear them. All I saw was this physical confrontation between 2 people who I knew to be trusted servants, and it upset me a lot. And I had a couple years clean, and I kept thinking, what if somebody was brand new at this? And there were a lot of newcomers at that dance, and they saw this, and so it got to the point where the region developed an ad hoc committee to address the situation, because it was a conflict about NA service and money. Imagine that. And I was invited to participate on that ad hoc committee, and I was like in this room with people with all these years, like 20 years and stuff. And I had like 3. And I watched how they did this, because I had heard them and I had seen them in personal situations working through conflicts without killing each other. But I'd never seen it in like a sort of professional Narcotics Anonymous situation, an official, I guess, Narcotics Anonymous situation. And so I watched them and I listened to what everybody said, and then I was invited to present what I saw, and I told what I saw. And one of the things I said is, I don't know this gentleman, but I happen to know that he's the convention committee chair. And you're supposed to be teaching me how to not behave like that. And I'm really happy to say that they resolved conflict. Nobody got killed, and they're actually friends today, which is pretty amazing. I've seen it in other situations where people badmouth somebody over a situation in Narcotics Anonymous, and that person came to the proper committee, the area, region, whatever, and presented the grievance, and things were resolved, and nobody killed anybody. And nobody got loaded, which was really important. And yet none of them left Narcotics Anonymous, which was more important. The 10th concept is our spiritual society's promise that if one of us is wronged in the service environment, the aggrieved trusted servants may ask that the wrong be made right. And there are ways to do that. And it's all about, if I felt like I had been wronged, it would be about me getting with my higher power, getting with my sponsor, doing a lot of writing, and then deciding the best way to approach the situation. And if that means bringing it to a committee, then that's what I would do, because I can't do this alone. Me going up to the person may be the solution, and it may not. It may make it worse. And so I have this guidance. The 10th concept's guarantee of the right to appeal for redress of a personal grievance is designed in part to protect those who exercise their 9th concept responsibility to speak their mind. So that was the one about the lone voice and everybody participating in the decision-making process, everybody having a voice. The 10th concept is our fellowship's guarantee of respect for the individual trusted servant. Okay, so then we get to this 11th concept, and it talks about managing our funds responsibly. We probably don't have enough time for me to talk about this one. I feel so strongly about what we do with our money. Really, really strongly. First of all, it's our money, not my money. And actually, I'm pretty tight-fisted with my money, but I'm even more tight-fisted when it comes to Narcotics Anonymous money. I think we should spend money where it makes sense to spend money. I don't think we should shortchange things, like when it comes to literature, when it comes to phone line services, when it comes to helping people do what they need to do to take H&I committees. I think that spending too much money on a barbecue is probably not the best use of our funds. But And there's this balance thing about that. If spending money on a barbecue brings newcomers into the family and shows them that we can have a good time without getting loaded, and we can bring our kids and we can bring our grandparents or whatever, then that's a wise use of money. It is, in my opinion, and in my experience. However, if the group, say, is holding on to like $400 or $500 for a year to fund that barbecue next year, I'm not okay with that. I don't think that's a responsible use of our money. If we're going to sell raffle tickets to get money for that barbecue, cool. Sell them a month or two ahead of the barbecue. But don't hold on to that money. Let it go. Move it along. The region needs it. World needs it. Other groups need it. Don't hold on to that money. I happen to be part of a home group that takes in considerable amount in our 7th tradition. And we made it a group conscience many years ago that we don't spend 7th tradition money on coffee or cakes. In fact, we don't spend it on napkins. We, as home group members, have a separate fund that we donate our own money to for cakes and coffee and paper plates and all that kind of stuff. Or somebody from the home group donates a pound of coffee. You know, that's how we take care of that. Because believe it or not, and especially if you're newer, coffee is not an essential requirement for a meeting. Especially nowadays when a lot of us, and I am one of them, will go to, you know, one of those green logoed places and buy their coffee. So sometimes I will bring like a 12-pack of toilet paper and donate to the facility because a lot of times there's not enough toilet paper in those restrooms. You know, we do that kind of thing. Our 7th tradition money goes to pay for literature and to area, world, and region. We give books to people who can't afford them. That's what I consider a responsible use of money. And it talks about our groups are free to decide for themselves how much they will contribute to the different levels of our service structure. We encourage them to do so and to do so responsibly. The groups have created the service structure not only to deliver services on their behalf, but also to coordinate those services. This is where we have also delegated the authority to coordinate the allocation of service resources at every level of service. And that reminds me that I want to mention that resources is not just money. A lot of times people think that resources means money. Oh, how much money can I put in the basket? Or how much money can I spend on lottery tickets or t-shirts or whatever? It is about resources as in people and time. We have a tendency to see a few people doing a lot of service and a lot of people taking advantage. Not everybody is cut out to be at region or world or area to do service. Some people love it. Some people don't want anything to do with it, and that's okay. There's room for everybody in Narcotics Anonymous to be of service. Whether it's putting chairs away, whether it's greeting people at the door and giving them a hug, there is room for everyone. And it talked about that everybody in Narcotics Anonymous can be a leader and everybody deserves the opportunity. I am grateful that the process of joining together to create the service structure is an expression of our group's humility. My home group is awesome. It is the best home group in the world as far as I'm concerned. Okay? And we take regular inventories and we carry the message really well. We have a really diverse home group base and we have a really diverse meeting. Okay, and you understand the difference between the home group and the meeting, right? But we can't do it all. If we had to maintain a phone line and print schedules and do all the things that we have, we wouldn't have time to have a meeting. And I'm pretty sure we'd all have bad attitudes too. We'd be tired. We'd be tired. So it's important to utilize our resources wisely. Don't burn people out expecting the same people to do everything all the time. If we all pitched in a little bit, we'd all have time to do more and other things. We need to keep communicating, share fully with others, and listen carefully to every voice. So if you get this book, and it's not expensive at all, considering how valuable it is, I think it's pretty cheap. There are some study materials in the back. There's some questions to look at, to answer, to participate in. And one of the things that my sponsorship group has done is we meet once a month to do a book study, and every year we pick a different book. We've gone through the steps, we've gone through the traditions, we've gone through the concepts. We've answered these questions, we've looked at them, we've worked on them, we shared them with each other. We continue to share them. Every time I read through here, I get a more powerful message every single time. I was telling some folks earlier that my first sponsor had suggested that I might not want to underline my basic text because as I read through it each time I'll get different things out of it, and that if I just underline or highlight that's all I would see every time. And I've kind of taken that to heart with most of the literature, but not this one. I have lots of underlining in here. I really, really, really encourage you to read through this, to bring it to your home groups, to talk about it. If you're a discussion leader one night, oh my God, what an awesome choice to choose from as a topic. You know, I've been to a lot of meetings where the traditions were a topic, especially that 7th tradition, you know, that's a good topic. But really, here's a source of material to share on, to ask questions about, and to bring to people who have been here a long time, who helped write these, who help participate in them, and who help embody them every day. I'm really, really grateful for this opportunity to share with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would like to thank both Bart and Karen for a great message. We'll leave the tape going for a little bit. If anybody else would like to share, if you would come sit up front so we can get you on the tape, and then you can also look at everybody when you're talking. If you have some experience you'd like to share, or you heard something you want to comment on, we got about 20 minutes.
I would also really encourage any questions, you know, as part of our purpose in being here to try and, you know, relay information to areas in Georgia and this region. So, you know, ask any questions that you have, and we'll do our best to give you experience, strength, and hope on it.
While we're doing that, somebody did ask what pages you read out of. If it works, the last one that you read,
okay.
If you could maybe find it, and we can give that to everybody.
Yeah. It looks like it was page 133 was our reading. I wrote everything down so you can see me afterwards, and I'll fill in the details.
Somebody like to come up and share?
Do you have a question?
You're resting your hand in the air? That's funny.
Come on up.
Yeah, it works.
Hey, I'm Reese. I'm a recovering addict. And I just want to say, first of all, thank you both for sharing. You know, it's really interesting because when I first got here, I don't know if anybody else did this, but I coveted some of the readings at the beginning of the meeting. I always wanted to read the yellow one because it had some really cool language and it was really exciting. I never wanted to read the traditions. I thought they were dry as dust. I thought they were really dull, and I didn't get them, and I didn't understand what they had to do with me staying clean and the struggles that I was going through. And then, you know, I got a couple of days. I calmed down a little bit, and I started hearing about the traditions, and I went to workshops about the traditions, and I started going to group consciences, and I started hearing about it, and I started reading about them, and suddenly it stopped being as dull. It stopped being boring. It stopped being something that I really wasn't accessible to me. Suddenly the traditions were about my life and how I relate with people, and how it's not just about me, and how I need to learn how to get along, not just with addicts, but especially with addicts, but with everybody in my life, you know? And so for me, the concepts were kind of the new traditions in that way. I was like, I don't understand this. When I first got to this area and I heard them, I was like, none of the words that you're putting together make sense in any kind of any kind of a real way. They're really abstract to me when I first read them, and I was like, well, okay, these sound like the corporate bylaws in the user agreement that you click on, that you just never read, that you disagree with. And it really, I mean, I don't know, you know, and so one of the things that I think is so helpful about the workshops at GRCNA is that if I don't know something, if I don't know what's going on, there's somewhere I can go to hear kind of what is going on. And you're one of the people who helped me get clean. You're the very first addict I ever met in Narcotics Anonymous. And I remember you talking to me about service the very first time we met. And I remember the impact that it had on me, even at that time, because I lived a life that was so lonely and so small. And I know now how much I was hurting my family, but because I was on my own, I thought nobody knew about me and I didn't matter. And it inspired me so much to meet someone who was part of something bigger, who had contributed to these incredible service bodies and the groups and just this stuff that I now know has saved my life. You know, some of the things that happen in world services and in region, you know, I don't think I've ever been to. I maybe have been to like half a region, and I hadn't been to area until I had like 6 months clean, and somebody voted me in as GSR, like kind of against my will, but I showed up. You know, but you know what? When I needed a meeting, I could look at the website and figure out where to go. When I needed help, there was a helpline that I could direct people to, that I could call. You know, and all of that stuff is kind of the invisible structure of NA that helps us work as a fellowship, that makes us not just life-saving, but effective at saving lives. It's not just something that can help me live, but something that has helped me find a new way to live. So I just want to say thank you again, and I really am so interested in this stuff, and I'm definitely going to pick up the book. So thanks a lot.
Thanks, Risa. Anyone else? We got about 15 more minutes. Come on up.
I got a puzzle that we've been dealing with, so I'll put it to you guys. We have a.
Who are you?
Hi, family. Addict named Kevin.
Hey, Kevin.
We have a secret board in NA, one where the ADs and RDs communicate. Correct? You guys know?
A secret board?
Secret board. It's specifically for RDs and ADs to share. It's been brought up at the last WSC. It's been decided not to make it open to the public. Okay? So on that board, we have a member who is considering a 10th concept, redress, because he felt that he was not treated properly and that his posts were deleted for causes that other people's posts weren't by the moderator. So he's bringing up a 10th concept. Here's the quandary. Who does he bring it to?
I don't have an answer for that, not knowing the details or being part of that service body or group. So
It's not it's
Facebook.
no, it's the WSC. This is a NAS created board, and it was brought up at the last WSC specifically whether or not to continue to keep it secret or to make it public.
Bart from Addicts. This is the fifth concept. For each responsibility assigned to a service structure, a single point of decision and accountability should be clearly defined. Now, I mean, it's very simple. When you address, this discussion board between ADRDs, so on and so forth, there can be things, and keep in mind, I am not in that realm of service, and I'm not familiar with this situation that you described.
It's actually in the latest car. You guys are being
I haven't
asked.
gotten there yet, but I will soon.
If you guys are going to the car tonight or tomorrow, they're
Yeah.
discussing whether or not they're bringing it forward that we need to make this board open.
Okay.
So who is responsible?
Key to applying the fifth concept is defining tasks that needs to get done from the start. First, create a service task, consider the authority, we delegate, and then we have a delegate or a trusted servant or a service board designated as what's called a single point of decision and accountability. If there is no decision made or no description of the single point of accountability, we end up with scenarios like you're requesting, which is who do we go to for redress? Go ahead.
I'm going to answer. There is a single point of accountability. It's the moderator of the board, and that was where the redress would start.
Okay.
Because he's the single point of accountability, and he's the one that's the decision-making person. So his redress is with the moderator, and the board itself would be the ones that would make the decision on what the redress would be.
The World Board.
No, the board on the moderator, the people who participate on the discussion board, who have seen the whole thing unfold. To bring that to the World Board is to assume that everybody at the World Service Conference has participated in this. And you and I both know that maybe 10% of the people who have access to the board participate, maybe another 20% read it. So the people who have read it and the people who have participated, along with the moderator, would be the people who would resolve the concept.
So is the 10th concept something you bring to a service body?
Yes.
But who created the service body called moderator?
The moderator was appointed, my understanding, the moderator was appointed by the World Board with the consent of the conference.
But the World Board is not a service body.
No, the World Board is a service body, but they're not the ones that are dealing directly with this particular service board.
10th concept is very clear. You bring it to the service body that's responsible,
Yes.
not the member responsible.
Well, no, I would think that the service body is the discussion board itself.
But that's not a service body. It was never created as a service body or elected. It's a discussion board for a service body.
I think that it truly would be disingenuous to take the time up for the conference to deal with this concept, with that.
Right, to bring it to the actual WSC. That's why I said it's a quandary. Especially since the person that they're trying to redress against is a World Board member.
Well, yeah,
Okay.
but that's why he was. It's really. Is it really a 10th concept? Is the question too?
I would believe that the people stating it believe it to be so.
Yeah, and that's part of it. Everything is perspective, and the perspective is skewed by which side of the issue you may sit on and everything else, which is, relatively new to this particular discussion board, and I haven't posted on it for very good reasons of my own at this point. Until I have something different to contribute than what's there, there's really no point in my name being there so that people know I'm there.
I'm pretty sure that we're not going to be able to bring a resolution to this at this meeting in this forum.
That's why I figured you guys.
And the greatest, and go ahead, sorry.
Well, but I think it's a valid question. I think it's something worthy of discussion. I just don't know if this is the forum to discuss it. But I would like to talk to you about it some more, and I know that there are some other people that would like to share.
I was just curious with you guys saying, concepts. Here's the point.
Well, I think what's happening. I think what's happening in this particular issue is that it seems to be localized to a service body that we're not particularly familiar with, and you just addressed it with me. So, what I would do automatically is, not specific, just one concept. I would kind of look into what other concepts might involve this situation as well, which also includes a seventh concept. It says all members of a service body bear substantial responsibility for that body's decision and should be allowed to fully participate in its decision-making processes. It says the concept suggests that each service body should encourage all members to participate in its decision-making processes. And there have been a few comments that I've heard made today about who's involved to determine the parameters of where it falls, and and like they said, try and involve maybe having outside opinions, or having or keeping it specific to whatever that body is expected, because that body would address the 12 concepts within that body. It's not necessarily that we would apply the 12 concepts to that body from outside. At least that's been my experience. So we kind of put it on them to use the concepts in their own capacities to resolve that issue. My thought.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you.
You're buying dinner tonight.
Hey guys, I'm Hannah.
Hey, Anna.
And, one of the things that, and I didn't hear all of this first gentleman's stuff, but one of the things that Karen said that really struck home with me was the ability to trust our trusted servants. Like, if we're gonna call them trusted servants, let's trust them. If we're practicing the other concepts of only putting people in positions that are trusted because they are good leaders and because they actually fulfill the requirements of what we've asked them to do, then we should trust them. And I don't know about you guys, but as an addict, I really struggle with trusting people. I don't even trust my husband half the time. It's going to be hard to trust. That's a separate issue, but still, it's going to be hard to trust the weird guy in the hat and the ponytail with someone that I don't know, But that doesn't mean that as a body, if we've made a group conscience to vote them into something, that I shouldn't practice that spiritual principle of trust. And it's not going to be easy. I mean, I am a control freak, and so when someone votes me into something, I just take over. And then I just wait until people tell me that it's not appropriate to change. I don't know that that's really the best way to go about it. But I do know that if they put me in that position, it's because they trust me. And I'm going to accept that trust and do the best job I can with what I have until they tell me to do differently. Because I'm not the boss, they're the boss, right? And maybe we may not always know what committee or what board is responsible to what person, but I do know that if we can get to a point where we accept that the people voted in were done so in a spiritual manner and a group conscience, then we might have the ability to trust our trusted servants and stop being dicks about shit. Maybe. I know that for me, when I take on a role at the area level or at the regional level, it's a big deal. And I don't think there's any person on the planet in this program that takes a position and thinks it's not a big deal. And so when we start picking apart at these people like they're not even people, let alone addicts, then we've missed the whole point of the concepts to begin with. And so I'm at a point where just for today, I'm going to trust my trusted servants. And I may not always like them. In fact, I don't like most people, let alone the people who are trusted servants in NA. But trusting someone does not require that I like them. Trusting someone does not require that I even love them. Trusting them just means accepting that they're going to do the best they can with what they have. So, thanks for letting me share.
Thanks for sharing. All right then. I don't know, I just have one thing to say that anytime I hear the word secret, a radar goes off for me right away. And I will hope that whatever issues are going on with that, the question that Kevin brought up, I thought, sometimes we all don't maybe need to be able to participate in certain things, but we definitely all need to be able to see what's going on together. Because when we can all see it, we can all help each other. So I really enjoyed today and learned a lot.
I suggest you all come to the car workshop tonight and hear.
Where's it going to be? What time? Give us.
It's on your program.
At 8:30. The
45 to 10:45 at the Shannon Room.
Thank you. So we'll see y'all
There is a motion
there.
dealing with this discussion board that will be discussed at that workshop.